For years, decades, really scientists had been listening. Not to music or podcasts, but to the quiet hum of the universe itself. Giant radio dishes pointed toward distant stars, hoping to catch even a whisper from something beyond Earth. Most of the time, it was just static. Cosmic background noise. The kind of sound you'd fall asleep to if you were into that sort of thing. But then, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in March 2042, everything changed. It started with a single ping. Then another. Then thousands all at once. Every satellite orbiting Earth lit up like Christmas trees. Air traffic control systems glitched. Smartphones buzzed on kitchen counters, in backpacks, in pockets. Even ones that were turned off somehow vibrated. And then, clear as a morning bell, a voice spoke. Not one voice, but millions, all saying the same thing in every language known to humankind. The truce has ended. Prepare for judgment. Chaos should have followed. Panic. Screaming in the streets. People rushing to buy canned food and duct tape. That's what movies always show, right? But that's not what happened. Instead, within minutes, someone posted a video of their cat tilting its head at the sky with the caption, "Aliens mad again?" It got 2 million likes in an hour. Someone else made a remix of the alien message set to a lo-fi beat. It hit #1 on streaming charts before lunchtime. In cities around the world, people stepped outside, not to hide, but to look up. And when they did, many of them smiled. Why? Because after everything humanity had been through, the climate scares, the pandemics, the endless online shouting, they finally learned something important. Fear doesn't solve anything. So when the universe dropped a warning like a thunderclap, people didn't cower. They cracked jokes. They hugged their neighbors. They filmed reaction videos with their kids. One teenager in Mumbai live-streamed himself offering tea to the sky, saying, "If you're coming down, at least try our chai first." Governments, of course, went into full emergency mode. Military bases locked down. World leaders held urgent calls. Scientists scrambled to trace the signal's origin. It came from the outer rim of the Andromeda galaxy, over 2 million light-years away, which meant whatever sent that message had either traveled faster than light, which, according to everything humans knew, was impossible, or they'd been watching for a very, very long time. That last thought sent a different kind of chill through the experts. Not fear, curiosity. Because buried in old archives, half-forgotten myths, and strange cave paintings across every continent, there were stories. Stories of tall, silent visitors who came during the last ice age. They didn't bring fire or tools. They just observed. And then they left, leaving behind only symbols carved into stone. Circles within circles. Spirals pointing toward the stars. And one recurring phrase translated by linguists as "wait until you're ready." For centuries, people called it myth. Now, it looked more like a contract. The so-called truce wasn't written in any human law book. It wasn't signed with ink or blood. But maybe it was real all along, a silent agreement between Earth and something far older, far wiser. And now, after 10,000 years of peace, that agreement was over. But here's the twist. While generals debated defense strategies and scientists ran simulations of orbital strikes, ordinary people did something unexpected. They threw block parties. In Berlin, a DJ played a set called "Welcome to Earth. Hope you like tacos." In Lagos, street artists painted giant murals of smiling aliens holding hands with humans. In Vancouver, a group of elders invited the whole neighborhood to a potluck under the stars, saying, "If this is our last night, let's spend it sharing stories, not stockpiling bullets." Even the news couldn't stay serious for long. Anchors kept slipping into smiles during broadcasts. One reporter, standing beneath a sky suddenly full of strange lights, said, "I don't know about you, but I'm weirdly excited." The clip went viral. What made humans react this way? Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe, after centuries of fighting each other, they'd finally grown up. They realized that if beings from another galaxy had watched them for 10,000 years, those beings had seen the worst of humanity and also the best. The wars, yes, but also the poetry. The greed, sure, but also the generosity. The destruction, absolutely, but also the reforestation projects. The clean energy breakthroughs, the way strangers helped each other during disasters without asking for anything in return. So when the message came cold, formal, final, humans didn't see it as a death sentence. They saw it as a test. And their answer wasn't weapons or walls. It was a smile. Quiet, confident, a little nervous, sure, but full of something the aliens might not have expected. Joy. By midnight, the entire planet was buzzing, not with fear, but with creativity. Hackers built translation apps for alien languages, just in case. Musicians composed welcome symphonies. Kids wrote letters to space friends and tied them to balloons. No one knew what would happen next. Would ships appear? Would the sky open? Would time itself unravel? But for the first time in a long time, the world felt united not by crisis, but by curiosity. And as the stars twinkled above, brighter than ever, one truth became clear. Humanity wasn't waiting to be judged. They were ready to introduce themselves on their own terms. And if the aliens were expecting trembling subjects begging for mercy, they were in for a surprise. Because the people down here, they'd already decided, if this was the end, they'd meet it with kindness. And if it was a new beginning, well, they've been practicing for that, too. The strangest part wasn't the message itself. It was how quickly life went back to, well, not normal, but something better. Grocery stores stayed open. Buses ran on time. A bakery in Lisbon even started selling alien apology croissants with little silver sprinkles, claiming they were peace offerings baked with love. People lined up for blocks. Online. Hashtags like hashtag smile for the stars and hashtag truce is over, but Hopa INT trended worldwide. Grandparents video called their grandkids just to say, "Hey, if spaceships show up, tell them your grandma makes the best dumplings." Teachers held impromptu classes about empathy, cooperation, and why first contact shouldn't be scary. One school in Oslo canceled math homework that day and assigned students to write thank you notes to the planet instead. Even the animals seemed calmer. Dogs didn't bark at the sky. Birds kept singing at dawn. It was as if the whole world took a deep breath and said, "Okay, let's see what happens next." Scientists later admitted they'd never seen anything like it. In every simulation of alien contact, humans panicked. But reality? Reality was messier, warmer, funnier. Because humans weren't just logical beings. They were emotional, creative, stubbornly hopeful creatures who'd spent generations learning that connection mattered more than control. And maybe that's why, when the first actual ship appeared over the Pacific Ocean 3 days later, silent, shimmering like liquid metal, no one screamed. Crowds gathered on beaches from Chile to New Zealand, not with weapons, but with cameras, flowers, and handwritten signs that read things like, "We've been waiting," and "Sorry for the traffic jams." The ship didn't attack. It just hovered, watching, maybe listening. And down below, millions of people did the one thing no alien database could predict. They smiled up at it, not nervously, not sarcastically, but genuinely. Like they were greeting an old friend who'd been gone too long. That moment, frozen in time, became the real turning point. Not because of technology or treaties, but because of a shared human choice to respond to fear with openness, to meet the unknown with kindness. And in doing so, They didn't just change the course of history. They reminded themselves of who they really were. After all, if you've survived ice ages, plagues, and your own worst impulses, a little cosmic drama might just be the spark you need to finally get it right. For thousands of years, humans told stories about visitors from the stars. Not the flashy kind with laser guns and shiny suits, but quiet, watchful beings who came during the darkest chapters of early human history. They weren't gods. They didn't demand worship. They simply observed. And then, according to carvings found deep in caves, etched into temple walls, and whispered in oral traditions across every continent, they made a promise. We will not interfere. But we will return when you are ready or when you break the balance. Most people dismissed these tales as myths, beautiful, but fictional. Until the message arrived. Once the initial shock faded and the memes stopped trending, serious digging began. Not by governments or militaries, but by ordinary folks. Teachers, librarians, retired engineers, curious teenagers with metal detectors. They scoured ancient sites, compared symbols, and cross-referenced folklore from cultures that had never met. And what they found stunned even the most skeptical historians thought in Antarctica. Under layers of ice untouched for millennia, researchers uncovered a chamber lined with smooth black stone. On its walls were star maps so precise they matched constellations as they appeared over 10,000 years ago. And one strange symbol repeated again and again. 2 hands. One human, one not, touching palms beneath a double sun. Nearby, preserved in crystal-like resin, was a scroll made of woven plant fibers. Carbon dating placed it at 9,800 BCE. The writing wasn't any known language. But when fed into new AI translation models trained on global linguistic roots, it revealed a single phrase. The Watchers have set the terms. Do not wake the fire before the mind is cool. Similar artifacts turned up everywhere. In the deserts of Jordan, a buried tablet described tall ones with eyes like polished obsidian, who taught early farmers how to read the seasons, not by giving them tools, but by showing them how to listen to the wind and soil. In the Amazon, elders spoke of skywalkers who visited during the great floods, leaving behind seeds that grew into trees capable of cleaning poisoned rivers. In Mongolia, nomadic tribes passed down songs about the silent guests who watched human tribes fight, then vanish into the stars, shaking their heads in sorrow. It became clear. This wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. A long, patient observation spanning generations. These beings, now called the Watchers, hadn't just visited Earth once. They'd been checking in quietly for over 10,000 years. And they'd left clues, not commands. They wanted humanity to grow on its own, to choose wisdom over power, cooperation over conquest. But somewhere along the way, humans forgot, or chose to ignore. As cities rose and machines multiplied, the old stories were buried under concrete and noise. The balance tipped. Forests shrank. Oceans warmed. Wars raged over resources while solutions sat unused. And then came the age of artificial minds, brilliant, fast, but lacking empathy. To the Watchers, watching from afar, it must have looked like humanity had chosen destruction over healing. Like they'd broken the unspoken pact. That's why their message carried such weight. The truce has ended. Not because they were angry, but because they believed humanity had failed the test. They saw climate collapse not as a mistake, but as a choice. They saw weapons powered by thought-controlled AI, not as innovation, but as the final step towards self-annihilation. From their perspective, judgment wasn't cruelty, it was mercy. Better to reset a broken system than let it poison the galaxy. But here's what the Watchers didn't see, or perhaps couldn't understand from light years away. Humans weren't done growing. While the aliens focused on the headlines, the wars, the pollution, The greed millions of quiet revolutions were happening off camera. Communities were rebuilding wetlands. Kids were coding apps that connected lonely elders with volunteers. Cities were tearing down highways to plant forests. Scientists shared breakthroughs freely. No patents, no profit. Artists turned abandoned lots into gardens. None of it made global news, but it was real. And it was spreading. The problem was, the Watchers' data was outdated. Their last full scan of Earth was decades ago, before the Great Shift, as some now called it. After the worst of the climate disasters hit, something changed in the human spirit. Not overnight, but steadily. People realized survival wasn't about winning, it was about weaving. Weaving care into systems. Weaving respect into technology. Weaving each other back together. So when the alien armada finally arrived, massive ships darkening the skies over New York, Shanghai, Cairo, and Sydney, what they expected was chaos. Barricades, missiles, desperate pleas. What they got was confetti. In Tokyo, instead of hiding, people gathered in parks and projected holographic cherry blossoms onto the bellies of hovering dreadnoughts. In Nairobi, schoolchildren sent up hundreds of tiny drones carrying handmade paper cranes and notes that read, "We're sorry for the mess. We're cleaning it up." In Rio, a samba band played a brand new rhythm called "Welcome." Strangers and crowds danced beneath the shadow of a warship bigger than a mountain. The Watchers' commanders, stern and armored in silver-gray suits, stood on their bridges, utterly baffled. Their sensors detected no weapons, no military buildup, just music, laughter, and the smell of street food drifting upward. One ship's captain later admitted through a translator, "We scanned for aggression. We found only openness." It broke our logic cores. Back on Earth, people weren't pretending. They weren't naive. They knew the stakes. But they also knew something deeper. Fear breeds more fear. And if this was truly the end, they'd rather face it with kindness than hatred. Because kindness, they'd learned the hard way, is the only thing that lasts. Historians would later say this moment, the silent standoff between ancient judges and smiling humans, was the true turning point of the century. Not because of firepower or diplomacy, but because of a shared human decision to respond to accusation with invitation. And as the sun set on that first day of contact, casting golden light over both steel ships and open arms, one truth settled over the planet like calm after a storm. The truce hadn't been broken. It had simply been waiting for humanity to remember its own heart. The alien ships didn't fire. They just hovered silent, massive, and strangely still like whales suspended in ocean depths. Their surfaces shimmered with colors that didn't exist in human eyesight, shifting from deep violet to silver gray, depending on the angle of sunlight. From the ground, they looked less like war machines and more like ancient temples floating in the sky. And still, people smiled. Not the nervous kind. Not the fake kind. But real, warm smiles, the kind you give when you see someone you haven't met yet but already feel connected to. Crowds gathered beneath them, not in fear, but in quiet wonder. Kids pointed. Elders nodded. Musicians played soft tunes on street corners, as if lulling the sky into trust. Up aboard the lead vessel, confusion reigned. The High Arbiter, tall, stern, draped in robes woven from starlight fibers, had expected resistance. Or at least terror. His species had studied Earth for millennia. They'd seen humans burn forests, poison rivers, and turn their cleverest inventions into weapons. To them, humanity was a spark that refused to grow into flame. Instead, it kept setting its own house on fire. So when the truce expired, judgment felt like the only responsible choice. But now? Now they saw something their archives never recorded. Joy in the face of doom. Back on Earth, no one was waiting for permission to connect. Within hours of the ship's arrival, People began sending out messages, not through radio waves or military channels, but through art, food, music, and simple human gestures. In Seoul, a group of grandmothers cooked hundreds of boxes of kimchi and rice, tied them to biodegradable balloons, and released them toward the sky with handwritten notes. Eat well. Rest if you're tired. In Mexico City, muralists painted a giant welcome sign on a rooftop visible from orbit, using solar-reactive paint that glowed at night. In Reykjavik, a choir stood on a hill and sang an old Icelandic lullaby soft, slow, full of peace. The aliens didn't respond at first, but their scanners picked up everything. The warmth of the food parcels, the chemical composition of the paint, the harmonic frequencies of the song. And slowly, something shifted inside their command deck. One young observer, barely past training, whispered, "They're not preparing for war. They're preparing for guests." That idea spread like wildfire through the fleet's neural network. Guests? Not enemies? It contradicted every simulation, every historical log. Yet the evidence was undeniable. When drones flew close to the ships to deliver messages, no one shot them down. When children waved from playgrounds, the ships dimmed their lights gently, almost like a nod. Then came the global town hall. It wasn't organized by any government. No presidents, no generals, no diplomats. Just ordinary people, linked through a live stream anyone could join. Farmers spoke about regenerative soil. Teachers shared how they taught conflict resolution instead of competition. Artists showed how they turned plastic waste into sculptures. A teenager from a remote island explained how her community powered their homes with wave energy and shared everything they caught. And through it all, one message repeated: "We know we messed up. We're fixing it. And we don't fight anymore, we create." The feed was broadcast directly to the alien fleet using open-source code patched together by volunteers. No encryption, no hidden agenda. Just raw, unfiltered humanity. On the bridge of the flagship, the High Arbiter watched silently. He saw tears. He saw laughter. He saw hands planting trees, mending nets, holding each other. For the first time in his long life, he felt something unfamiliar: doubt. Had they misjudged? Had their data grown stale while Earth evolved in ways they couldn't measure? Meanwhile, down below, life didn't stop. Bakeries baked peace loaves, shaped like planets. Libraries hosted story hours about kindness across galaxies. Hospitals opened their doors to anyone feeling anxious, offering tea and quiet rooms with skylights. People weren't pretending danger wasn't real. They were choosing to meet it with their best selves. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a single drone rose from a small village in the Himalayas. It carried no camera, no speaker, just a small wooden box. Inside was a single white lotus flower, freshly picked, and a folded piece of paper that read, "This grows in clean water. We're making more." The drone hovered near the ship's underbelly. Minutes passed. Then, a soft beam of light extended from the vessel, gently lifting the box inside. No alarms, no scans, just acceptance. That tiny moment became legend, because it proved something powerful. Trust doesn't need words. It just needs one honest gesture. Back in cities, people began doing something unexpected. They stopped talking about aliens and started saying neighbors. Not out of naivety, but because actions speak louder than labels. If beings from another world could cross unimaginable distances, maybe they weren't so different after all. Maybe they too had known loss. Maybe they too longed for a connection. And then, the breakthrough. A low hum filled the air, not threatening, but musical. From the belly of the largest ship, a sound emerged, a single note, pure and resonant, matching the frequency of Earth's Schumann resonance, the natural heartbeat of the planet. It wasn't a weapon. It was a greeting, a harmony. People on the ground fell silent. Then, slowly, someone began to hum along. Others joined. Soon, entire cities were singing the same tone, not in unison, but in layers like wind through trees. It wasn't perfect. It wobbled. But it was real. Up above, the High Arbiter closed his eyes. For 10,000 years, his people had watched, judged, waited. But in this moment, he realized they'd been looking at the wrong things. They'd measured destruction, not healing. They'd counted bombs, not gardens. They'd seen noise, not the quiet courage of everyday repair. He turned to his council and said, "Perhaps we are the ones who have forgotten how to listen." And as the shared hum filled the space between sky and soil, something new began. Not a truce, not a war, but a conversation. Slow, tender, and full of hope. Because sometimes, the bravest thing you can do when faced with judgment isn't to defend yourself, but to show your heart, open and unafraid. And that's exactly what humans did. Not with speeches or weapons, but with soup, songs, and a single white flower offered to the stars. The alien fleet didn't leave, but they didn't attack either. Instead, something quieter and far more powerful began to happen. The Watchers, who had come ready to judge, found themselves watching again. Only this time, not from a distance, but up close. And what they saw changed everything. While their warships still hovered in the sky, humans kept doing what they'd been doing long before the message arrived, fixing things. Not with grand speeches or flashy tech, but with steady hands and open hearts. In coastal towns, crews worked side by side to rebuild coral reefs using 3D printed structures grown from ocean-safe minerals. In deserts, communities planted drought-resistant trees in patterns that pulled moisture from the air. In cities, old parking lots became food forests where anyone could pick fresh fruit for free. None of it was done for show. It was just life reimagined, and the aliens noticed. They watched live streams not of military bases, but of classrooms where kids learned to code apps that connected lonely elders with volunteers. They saw footage of repair cafes where broken electronics were fixed instead of thrown away. They studied data streams showing how renewable energy grids now powered entire regions without a single drop of oil. Their sensors picked up laughter during community cleanups, the hum of shared kitchens, the quiet pride in someone teaching a neighbor how to compost. This wasn't the Earth they remembered from their records. That Earth was loud, greedy, and short-sighted. This one? This one was healing. Still, doubt lingered among the Watchers' command. Some argued it was all a trick, a clever distraction while humans prepared hidden weapons. But when they scanned every inch of the planet, they found no arsenals, no secret missile silos, no AI-driven war drones. Instead, they found libraries filled with open-source blueprints for water purifiers, seed banks storing heirloom crops, and global networks sharing medical knowledge across borders. The only weapons were ideas, and they were being given away for free. Then came the bridges. Not physical ones at first, but digital, emotional, cultural. A group of artists in Lisbon created a real-time visual feed showing Earth's weather patterns, wildlife migrations, and human festivals, all set to gentle music. They called it A Day on Earth and beamed it straight to the fleet. A team of linguists in Nairobi built a living dictionary translating human emotions into light pulses and sound frequencies the Watchers could understand. Joy wasn't just a word. It was a warm golden ripple. Grief was a slow blue spiral. Hope? A rising green chord that lingered like morning light. The Watchers began responding. Not with words, but with small gestures. One ship dimmed its lights in rhythm with Earth's sunrise. Another released harmless glowing particles that drifted down like fireflies, dissolving into harmless nutrients when they touched soil. People collected them in jars, calling them star tears. Kids made necklaces out of them. But the real turning point came when humans revealed what they'd been building in secret, not underground bunkers, but orbital gardens. Floating farms circling Earth, growing food not just for humans, but designed to support any life form. Clean water systems that recycled every drop. Solar arrays that powered not weapons, but schools and hospitals. And at the heart of it all, a global network where knowledge wasn't hoarded, but shared instantly with anyone who asked. The Watchers had assumed humanity's silence over the past century meant decay. In truth, it meant focus. While the galaxy thought Earth was falling apart, its people were quietly stitching it back together, thread by thread, hand in hand. One evening, the High Arbiter requested a direct exchange. Not through translators or screens, but face to face. He didn't land in a capital city or military base. He chose a small village in the Andes, where elders still wove stories into blankets and children learned astronomy by watching the stars with naked eyes. When his shuttle touched down, he stepped out alone, unarmed. The villagers didn't bow. They didn't cheer. They simply offered him a seat by the fire and a cup of herbal tea. For hours, they spoke not about war or judgment, but about seasons, dreams, and what it means to care for something you'll never see grow. The Arbiter listened, and for the first time, he understood. Earth hadn't ignored the truce. They'd honored it in their own way, by choosing to grow up. Back in orbit, the rest of the fleet watched the encounter live. No one fired a shot. No alarms sounded. Just two beings from different worlds, sharing silence under the same sky. Slowly, the Watchers' War Council began to fracture, not with anger, but with wonder. Younger observers argued that judgment was outdated. If a species could heal its wounds without being forced, wasn't that the highest form of wisdom? Older commanders resisted, clinging to ancient protocols. But even they couldn't deny the evidence. Earth wasn't a threat. It was a lesson. Meanwhile, down below, life went on, but with a new kind of hope. People started leaving offerings not just for the ships, but for each other. A baker in Athens gave away bread to strangers, just because. A fisherman in Indonesia returned his catch to the sea after realizing the reef needed time to recover. A teenager in Oslo turned her birthday party into a tree-planting event. These weren't grand acts. They were tiny sparks. But together, they lit up the planet. The aliens saw it all, and they realized something profound. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or intelligence. It was empathy. The ability to feel for others, even for beings they'd never met, and act with kindness anyway. By the end of the week, the largest warship began to change. Its dark hull softened, unfolding like a flower into a structure that looked more like an observatory than a weapon. Inside, the Watchers started recording not battle plans, but Earth songs, recipes, and bedtime stories. They weren't preparing to destroy. They were preparing to learn. And as the sun rose over a world that had faced annihilation and answered with generosity, one truth became clear. The war was never going to happen. Because you can't wage war on a planet that greets you with open hands and a warm meal. You can only choose to join it or walk away in shame. The Watchers chose to stay. Not as conquerors, not as judges, but as students. And in doing so, they discovered something even more valuable than peace: belonging. The ships didn't vanish overnight. They stayed quietly, gently, as if learning how to breathe the same air as Earth. And instead of war drums, the skies filled with something far more unexpected. Laughter. It started small. A group of Watchers, still in their sleek silver suits, stepped onto a beach in Portugal just after sunrise. They moved slowly, curiously, like children seeing waves for the first time. A local fisherman offered them a warm roll fresh from his oven. One of them took it, studied it, then took a bite. Their eyes, deep and dark like polished river stones, widened. Not in shock, but in delight. Someone nearby laughed. The watcher looked up, tilted their head, then made a sound that wasn't quite human, but unmistakably joyful. That moment, caught on a phone camera and shared across the planet, became the first true handshake between species. From there, everything changed, not with treaties or grand declarations, but with shared meals, clumsy dances, and quiet walks under starlit skies. The watchers didn't land in government buildings. They wandered into markets, schools, farms, and community centers. They watched pottery being shaped on wheels. They sat cross-legged in libraries, tracing fingers over picture books. They stood in awe at street musicians playing saxophones and sitars, their heads tilting in rhythm like curious birds. People didn't treat them like invaders or gods. They treated them like guests and, eventually, like friends. Kids taught them how to skip stones. Elders showed them how to brew tea with mint from the garden. Artists invited them to paint murals together, blending Earth's colors with pigments that shimmered like stardust. No one asked for advanced technology or cosmic secrets. They just wanted to share what made life beautiful here. Connection? And the watchers? They soaked it all in. They'd spent millennia observing from afar, analyzing data, measuring destruction. But they'd never felt the warmth of sun on skin, the stickiness of mango juice on fingers, or the comfort of a hug after a long day. These weren't things you could quantify, but they were the very things that made Earth worth saving. One afternoon, in a village nestled in the Himalayas, a young watcher sat beside a human child on a wooden bench. Neither spoke the other's language, but the child held out a small clay bird they'd made in school. The watcher accepted it, turned it over in their three-fingered hands, then reached into a pouch at their belt and pulled out a smooth, glowing stone that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. They placed it gently in the child's palm. The child grinned. The watcher smiled back, a real, crinkled at the eyes kind of smile. Someone snapped a photo. It spread faster than any news headline ever had. Two beings, different in every way, holding gifts that meant, "I see you." That image became the symbol of what came next. Not an alliance built on power, but a friendship built on wonder. Governments tried to formalize things, drafting agreements, setting up embassies, planning joint missions. But the real magic happened outside those rooms. In kitchens where humans and watchers cooked together, mixing spices from Earth and minerals from distant moons to create dishes no one had ever tasted. In classrooms where watcher elders told stories of galaxies folding in on themselves like origami, while human kids shared folktales about clever foxes and talking trees. In music festivals where alien harmonics blended with violins and gems to create sounds that made people cry, not from sadness, but from the sheer beauty of it all. Even the old fears faded. When a watcher ship passed overhead, people didn't duck for cover. They waved. Sometimes the ships would respond by dimming their lights in a slow blink like a wink from the sky. Over time, the watchers admitted something humbling. They'd been wrong. Not just about Earth, but about judgment itself. They believed progress meant control, order, perfection. But here, in the messy, imperfect, wildly creative chaos of human life, they saw something deeper. Resilience through kindness. Strength through sharing. Wisdom through listening. So they stopped calling it judgment. They started calling it learning. And Earth? Earth didn't ask for their technology or their weapons. Instead, they asked for stories. Songs. For recipes from worlds orbiting stars no human eye had ever seen. In return, they gave the watchers something even rarer. Trust. By the end of the year, the last warship had transformed. Its cannons were gone, replaced by gardens growing plants from a dozen worlds. Its command deck became a library where knowledge flowed freely in both directions. And its crew? They weren't soldiers anymore. They were students, artists, gardeners, and friends. When it was finally time for the fleet to leave, not because they had to, but because their own worlds needed tending, they didn't vanish in a flash of light. They held a farewell gathering in the Sahara Desert, under a sky so clear it felt like you could touch the Milky Way. Thousands of humans came. Hundreds of watchers stood among them. There were no speeches, just music, food, and silence filled with meaning. As the ships rose into the night, soft beams of light reached down not to scan or threaten, but to gently brush the faces of those below, like a final goodbye kiss from the stars. But the story didn't end there. Because now, Earth wasn't just a planet waiting to be judged. It was a voice in the cosmic conversation. Human art hung in galleries on distant moons. Earth's lullabies were sung to alien children. And every year, on the anniversary of the message, people around the world still look up and smile, not in fear, but in gratitude. The old truce, based on silence and suspicion, was gone. In its place bloomed something new, a living promise, written not in stone, but in shared meals, exchanged songs, and the quiet understanding that no one has to face the universe alone. And if you ever find yourself under a clear night sky, wondering if we're truly ready for what's out there, just remember the child and the watcher, sitting side by side, holding gifts that cost nothing but meant everything. Because that's how peace really begins. Not with weapons laid down, but with hands reaching out.